to the announcement for the National Park Service National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program. This is a beautiful Friendship Friday culminating at the end of National Park Week. The Network to Freedom is announcing 16 new listings representing sites, facilities, and programs across 9 states in the US Virgin Islands. The Network to Freedom advances the idea that all human beings embrace the right to self-determination and freedom from oppression. For 23 years, the Network to Freedom has provided support and technical assistance to knowledge keepers, grassroots organizations, engaged communities, and professional partners in telling the stories of the history of resistance to slavery by freedom seekers and their allies. Not only does the network support historic sites, which we're all familiar with, but they also democratize access and research to the general public. They hold facilities such as archives, libraries, and special collections that hold the diaries, letters, and other historical newspapers and documents that freedom seekers left to tell the stories themselves, their allies preserved so that their stories could be told into the future, and also plantation records and wanted ads for those enslavers that tried to return them to a status of enslavement. The network also has multiple interpretive programs that tell the history of resistance that are not place-based, but tell the general histories, legacies, and impacts, connecting those histories and impacts to the present and into the future. These interpretive programs are traditional in nature, such as tours and interpretive program, First Person, but also through art, photography, theatrical productions, and music. The network allows the public to connect to and learn about the struggle for self-liberation in an engaging and culturally meaningful way. Now we are going to have the opportunity to see an example of how music has supported resistance to enslavement and to the current fight for civil rights by marginalized communities. Matt Hampsey, a supervisory ranger at New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park, is going to render us a selection.
Good morning. I am grateful to be part of this important event today. Music has always played an important role in the history of the Underground Railroad. African American spirituals have served as a firsthand account of the painful struggles, as well as offering hope and sustenance along the long road to freedom. New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park has chronicled some of these stories of hope, struggle, and emancipation in its musical collection, Freedom is Coming, Songs of Freedom, Resistance, and the Underground Railroad. One of these songs, Many Thousand Gone, reflects on the struggles of those who found their way to freedom, as well as the many others who endured a lifetime of enslavement.
Thank you so much, Matt. That song includes a sample and interpretation of the song We Shall Overcome, which is a song written for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. The bravery, the belief, and the commitment to declare we shall overcome resonates today as our nation confronts civil rights and racism. It's a very powerful, music is a very powerful tool to interpret resistance and the hope that we all share that we will overcome. Now it is my great honor and privilege to introduce the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. Madam Secretary, over to you.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Dr. Lowe, our esteemed National Park Service historian. I'm honored to be your co-worker. And a huge thanks to Matt Hampsey for that beautiful music, for setting the stage for today's announcement. I also want to thank Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff for hosting us today, and I extend a special thanks to the National Park Service staff who worked so hard to execute a really terrific National Park Week. Our country is facing a moment of reckoning that requires us to learn from history, to heal and grow. Today's announcement reminds us of the dark pages in our history books, but also highlights the incredible strength and resilience of Black communities. From the moment enslaved Africans arrived in North America, many resisted slavery by escaping. Slaveholders and policymakers criminalized the act of resisting slavery through escape, making that act of liberation all the more risky. Whether they knew it or not, each person who escaped from slavery became a part of a network of freedom seekers who believed in the power of self-determination and their right to freedom, humanity, and equality. Over time, this grassroots movement grew into a diverse network of courageous people, each with unique stories of how they claimed their freedom and helped others to do the same. Today, we know it as the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program helps all of us to more fully understand the breadth, depth, and diversity of the experiences of the slaves who built our country and sought freedom for themselves and their descendants. Today, with the announcement of 16 new Network to Freedom listings across 9 states and the islands, our country will have the opportunity to see a more complete version of our history. Each site, whether it be a digital exploration or a physical place, tells the story of America. They will join the nearly 700 listings in 39 states, Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Virgin Islands already in the Underground Railroad Network. These sites are incredibly important to recognize the diverse history of our country and will play an important role in the learning and healing that we must undertake to ensure we're building a more just and equitable country. We need to look no further than the news of this week to know that our work is not yet done. Serious inequities still exist in this country. We must acknowledge the pain that African American communities across the nation and around the world feel during these turbulent times and commit ourselves to real progress. To do that, we must start by recognizing the history that brought us here. Now, as we celebrated National Park Week this week, each day has had a theme. And so in honor of Friendship Friday, I'll introduce my new friend and fierce advocate for underserved communities, Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff.
Thank you so much, Secretary Haaland. It's my absolute honor to join you all on this Friendship Friday to celebrate National Park Week. We are so fortunate to have you serving as our Secretary of the Interior. Madam Vice President sends her love and says hello, and wanted to make sure I said hi to you and everyone else. I look forward to our growing friendship and working together in the years ahead. I also want to say a special thank you to the entire team at the United States Department of the Interior, the National Park Service, and to everyone involved in the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program. We are so grateful for your efforts to tell a more complete and inclusive history of our nation. Everyone who knows me knows how much I love history. I really do. Studying our past helps us better understand who we are, how we got here, and what we need to do to build a better future. I'm also a big believer in the power of storytelling. Now, I've been on the road quite a bit over the past couple of months, just checking in with people all across our beautiful country. People like Pastor Bobby Smith in Las Vegas, Nevada. He opened up his home to provide food to families in his community that needed it during this horrible pandemic. People like Kiwa Pueblo Governor Tenorio in New Mexico, it was my first trip as second gentleman, who encouraged his community to pause some of their most honored tribal traditions in order to protect the public health of his community over this past year. And people like Irene Webster, I just met earlier this week in Burlington, Vermont. She's a social services advocate for her Swahili community living there in Burlington. And she grew so frustrated by the amount of misinformation out there about vaccines. So she took action. She wrote a song in her native language to reassure her community about the importance and safety of vaccines. Stories matter, because it's the stories that stay with us. And that's why I am so excited about the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program. This program connects people from different backgrounds, including archivists, community historians, artists, tribal leaders, professors, and park rangers, all around a common goal: to tell the stories of the resilient freedom seekers and their allies. It's their stories that help us understand the history of the brave individuals who escaped from slavery. They teach us about the tenacity and accomplishments of people who were not in my history books growing up. The reality is, not all stories have been documented and preserved equally, and that's got to change. And now this is something that we as Americans are beginning to come to terms with. It's time to shine a light on the unknown heroes who dedicated their lives to making systemic changes in our country. I can only imagine the number of individuals who have been overlooked in all those old record books. Their stories are just begging to be discovered. And as a society, we really do have a responsibility to ourselves, our ancestors, to listen to all voices from the past and allow them to pave the way for a more just future. Weeks like this one provide reassurance that progress in the fight for justice is possible. But as Secretary Haaland just said, there is so much work to do. Lifting up stories like the ones these new sites commemorate will inspire us as we continue the long journey towards justice for all of us. But enough from me. It's time for us to learn. Now, the experts from the National Park Service are standing by to share their stories behind some of the new sites being announced today. So, Dr. Lowe, I'm going to turn it right back to you.
Thank you, Second Gentleman. And thank you, Madam Secretary, for those powerful words, for the new reinvigorated charge that you have given the National Park Service to tell the stories of this nation in a full, expanded, truthful, and hopefully reconciliation toward freedom for all. Now I will turn it over to Casimir Rasecki, who is a park ranger at Gulf Islands National Seashore on the Panhandle of Florida, to tell us about one of our new members.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Lowe. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Located on Naval Air Station Pensacola in Pensacola, Florida, the Barrancas, which today is a landscape where you can find 3 masonry forts a short distance from me, you have Advanced Redoubt, and you also have the Spanish Water Battery. And then we also have here, we can see Fort Barrancas. They're all a part of Gulf Islands National Seashore. Gulf Islands National Seashore is one of 423 national parks. And this year, we are celebrating here at Gulf Islands our 50th birthday. This landscape preserves powerful and emotional stories about the Black freedom struggle. Today, the Barrancas joins the National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program, which helps commemorate that struggle. One story I want to share with everybody this morning is that of a freedom seeker named Henry Stallberg. In August of 1863, the third summer of the American Civil War, Henry escaped from his enslavers' plantation in Alabama. Before reaching the Union Army encamped here at the Barrancas, Confederate soldiers captured and then tortured Henry. Those Confederates returned Henry to his enslaver, who had an iron bar riveted tightly around Henry's right ankle. This was an effort to punish and prevent Henry from escaping again. Though the white enslaver controlled Henry's body, they did not control his soul, which longed to be free. Henry fought for his freedom several months later, again in November 1863. He traveled at night through woods and swamps. He even nearly drowned while trying to cross a stream. Covering about 100 miles in the course of 3 weeks, all while dragging that iron bar on the ground, Henry successfully reached the Barrancas and freedom. Here at the Barrancas, Henry found Union soldiers who helped him remove that iron bar. Henry then joined the Union Army, becoming one of about 200,000 men of color who fought for the Union. Henry served in a regiment called the 86th United States Colored Troops. This regiment participated in several campaigns, including one that liberated around 600 enslaved men, women, and children. Henry survived the war and would marry and live for a time in Louisiana. As a freedom seeker and as a Union soldier, Henry fought against systems of oppression and violence targeting Black Americans. Visiting the Barrancas here at Gulf Islands National Seashore, we can immerse ourselves in and find inspiration in a place where Henry fought to advance the cause of racial equality and civil rights. Thank you very much, everybody. Back to you, Dr. Lowe.
Thank you, Kaz. It's always wonderful to hear about one of the stories that we tell in our 423 national parks. And most people are familiar with those national parks. But many don't know that the National Park Service administers over 72 community-based recreation, preservation, and interpretation programs. Through these programs, such as the Network to Freedom, NPS serves the American people and the global community as facilitators so that individuals, communities, stakeholders, and partners are empowered to identify and tell their own local and regional stories. These dozens of community assistance programs, they connect with those at our national parks, but more importantly, they expand the histories of our nation beyond park boundaries. And they ensure that local underrepresented communities and previously marginalized voices are preserved and told. One of those sites that illustrates the power of NPS programs to cross boundaries and a new Network to Freedom member is the Lizzie Amby escape site. This site in Dorchester County, Maryland, is the site of the 1857 escape from enslavement of Miss Amby, her husband, Nat, along with 14 other freedom seekers who took their freedom in early October 1857. The evidence that we have of this escape is based on a runaway notice that was placed on October 21st in the 1857 in the Cambridge Democrat, a local newspaper. This article was reprinted in William Steele's 1872 book, The Underground Railroad. Steele's entry for the case focused on his discussions with Nat and included the following text. Observing that Lizzie looked pretty decided and resolute, a member of the committee remarked, "Would your wife fight for freedom?" Nat replied, "I have heard her say she would wade through blood and tears for her freedom." The property includes a house and outbuildings of the enslaver of Lizzie Amby, Dr. Alexander Hamilton Bailey, and dates to the 1740s. Although the now long and narrow urban lot is in existence, the property is no longer on the site, although some outbuildings do exist. The National Park Service leverages its resources, expertise, and convening power to meet communities and individuals where they are, and to support their commitment to bear witness to previously silenced histories, study their impacts, and draw connections to the continuing legacies in the present and into the future. We hope that the Network to Freedom and other programs of the National Park Service contribute to the learning, the understanding, and the commitment to be a more perfect union. Now, I'm going to turn it back to our second gentleman and Madam Secretary for comments or questions.
Dr. Lowe, how could people learn more watching at home? It's so fascinating, all these stories that you're talking about, but how could folks at home learn more about some of the issues and where to find some of these sites?
Well, the first stop, I recommend someone that's interested in the work of the Network to Freedom and the National Park Service to visit our website. www.nps.gov is our general website. And you can put in a search term, a keyword, freedom, civil rights, and you will learn about the multiple programs and parks that interpret the national stories and those local and regional stories that give life to us as a nation. So we first encourage you to go onto our website, look up the parks and the programs that you're interested in, and learn more about these histories.
Thank you.
And Dr. Lowe, I would just like to know what inspired you early on for you to become the chief historian of the National Park Service, and what message do you have for young girls across the country who are watching today, and how they can be involved in our history of our country and the National Park Service?
Thank you for that question. One of my passions is to be a mentor to those who love history and who have gotten the question from their parents, what are you going to do with a history degree, right? How are you going to make money? How are you going to survive, right? But I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, which has one of the largest historic districts in the country, very active historic preservation community. But I wasn't involved in that, even surrounded and living in it. It wasn't until I went to Howard University and I entered a public history class that I learned about the possibility of being a professional historian, preserving our history in the places where history happens. And that kind of directed my path. I learned more and more. I wrote a National Historic Landmark for Howard University for its role in the desegregation of public education through the Brown versus Board of Education case. And then from there, everyone has a National Park Service story, went through various types of internships, temporary employment, until I made my way to here, Chief Historian. I'd like to also say that I am the first African-American and the first woman in the Park Service history to hold this place. And I consider it an honor, a privilege, and a responsibility to carry forth the legacies of those before me that made a space for me, and to open the door and the window to all those that come after me. Thank you for that question.
So well said. Park Ranger, I saw you smiling when she talked about everyone has a unique path to get to the Park Service. What's yours?
Yeah, mine was through interning with the National Park Service. My career, my journey, as I like to call it, began in 2010 when I took a chance internship at Harper's Ferry National Historical Park. Just days into my summer internship, I realized that I wanted to be a park ranger, and I wanted to be one of those vehicles that passed on and pushed forward, advanced the stories of our nation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll ask to Park Ranger Rosicki. It looks pretty windy out there today, and so thanks for standing out there and joining us. I mean, what we're finishing up National Park Week. What is your favorite park besides the one that you're standing in right now?
My favorite national park is whichever national park I'm standing in. I always find inspiration and joy in learning about the natural landscapes, the cultural or historical landscapes, as well as recreating in my national parks. So each national park is unique. It reflects the diversity of our country. And so, again, wherever I'm at, whatever park I'm in, that's my favorite national park.
Perfect answer.
Well, Dr. Lowe, your words were so inspiring. Really, the vice president, also a Howard grad, as I'm sure you know, and she says the same thing all the time. I might be the first, I don't want to be the last. And to hear your words and the way you spoke them, I can't wait to tell her about that when I see her later tonight. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's also can be tough to talk to all these folks, but it's so important to put that out there. So thank you for that. It's just really inspiring.
Thank you. And it becomes easy when you're passionate and committed to the good work that you're doing, and you have great colleagues and the support of your leadership to tell these stories. So thank you so much. I'm going to ask if you have any more closing thoughts for us today.
I'll just say, get out into the outdoors and visit a national park soon.
Well, I agree with that, but also thanks for having me. I love learning new things. I love learning about national parks and the stories and the new sites. It's just really great. So I encourage everyone to go online, learn more about it, but enjoy these amazing, beautiful, wonderful national parks we have out there.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again on this Friendship Friday of the end of National Park Week. Get out there, find your park, and during this pandemic and this time of reconciliation and reckoning within our nation, be safe and please be well.